Now let me tell you some of the basic mortality measures. The first one, which is widely used, is known as crude death rate. As shown in the slide, is the simplest measure of mortality, expressed as number of deaths in a year divided by total population at mid-year. At mid-year, basically, because the population at risk. So as shown in the slide, we are talking about crude death rate. The reason it's crude, because as I mentioned earlier, that age and sex are very important elements of any demographic analysis, and unless until you use you control for ages, or you introduce age as a factor, it remains crude. CDR is considered as a poor measure because it doesn't age structure taken into consideration. Therefore, it is usually higher in countries where the percentage of the older population is higher, because there are more people at the risk of dying. For example, you can see in the slide that countries which are more developed, they have more people who are in the older ages. And the countries which are less developed, they have fewer people in the older ages. The percentages are much lower. And that corresponds with high crude death rate, for example, in Russia and UK, and low death rates in countries in the Middle East, in Brazil, Mexico, Algeria, Egypt, Pakistan, Iran, Jordan. So Jordan has the lowest crude death rate because it also has a very small percentage, only 4% of the population which is older. The reason it is so, because since there are older people, more older people in Russia and UK, so they are more at higher risk of dying. And that's why age is a very important factor when you are studying mortality or death rates. Now, how to adjust for those ages is known as age-specific death rate. Because what you do as slide, age-specific death rate is adjusted for age and determines the mortality rate in each age group, usually in 5 years interval. It is defined as death in a year of persons age X. For example, below age 5, 5 to 9, or 10 to 14, or whatever, as you can have different age groups. So it's known as age-specific death rate, and you have number of persons in age X as a denominator, deaths in years of person in age X as a numerator, multiplied by 1,000. That gives you age-specific death rate in different age groups. Okay. For example, here are the age-specific death rates for Pakistan and UK. You can note here that the death rate in UK is higher than in Pakistan, I mentioned, because of age factor. But if you look at different ages, the death rate in many ages in Pakistan is very high. For example, at young ages, below age 1, it's substantially higher, almost 10 times higher than UK. But as the population ages, the death rate becomes higher in UK, and is still not that high in Pakistan, especially in 55 to 64 year age groups, because everybody eventually has to die, and 65 plus, and that's why there's a jump here. But still, it is not more than UK. And so what happens in case of Pakistan, the weightage is in this age group, and that's why crude death rate is lower in Pakistan, and it's higher in UK, because there are more people who are elderly. Then there are other measures of mortality. Very widely used is maternal mortality. It is known as maternal mortality ratio instead of the rate. It is conventionally defined as the number of deaths, as shown in the slide here, of women due to during or 40 days, 2 days after childbirth, per 100,000 live births. For the reason, because it's a rare event, and that's why you basically look at how many women died who were at risk, and that risk is calculated through how many births took place. And that's why it's a ratio. They are two independent of each other. They are not belong to the same group, and that's why mortality ratio is considered a ratio. Then there are mortality rates which are at younger ages. In this slide, we are going to show you that how infant mortality is calculated. Very simple. Number of deaths of infants below 1 year in a year, in a time period, divided by number of live births in a year. How many children were born? Out of those, how many survived to year 1? That is known as infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate deserves a special consideration because it is one of the main indicators of social, economic, and health conditions in a population. Besides, it can be reduced in a short span of time through public health measures and proper care of pregnant women and the newborn. Here I can show you how a country in Pakistan's neighborhood, in South Asia, Sri Lanka, how infant mortality declined in very short period from above 200 per 1,000 live births to getting close to about 17 or 15. Whereas in Pakistan, the infant mortality rate was little lower than Sri Lanka in the 1921 to 30, and by the year 2000, it has still little more than less than 100. Now, Sri Lanka has infant mortality rate has declined further, and Pakistan is still struggling with about 60, less than 60 infant mortality rate. Now, let me show you how infant mortality rates have declined in many countries which are predominantly Muslim. Here it has come from a book which I have written, and here you can see that Egypt had a substantially higher infant mortality rate than Pakistan in 1960s, and now Pakistan has the highest infant mortality rate, although Iran, Bangladesh, and Pakistan had about the same level of infant mortality in 1960s, but Pakistan is at the highest level now. Then there are other measures of infant mortality at early ages. I'll just quickly go through that. Deaths under 1 week is known as early neonatal mortality rate. It's just divided by the live births in a year. Deaths during first 1 to 4 weeks, known as late neonatal mortality, divided by live births in a year. And then you have deaths during 4 to 52 weeks, that is before the child could reach 1 year, between 1 month to just less than 12 months, that is known as post-neonatal mortality. These all show certain indicators of how health care is being provided. And then there is a perinatal mortality rate, which equals stillbirths plus deaths under 1 week, divided by stillbirths by live births in a year. Now, this is very difficult to get, provided one has real record system which shows that how many women became pregnant, and how of those the stillbirths and live births, add to them, that is the total number of women who got pregnant, and then you have that in the denominator, divide stillbirths plus deaths under 1 week, and that gives you perinatal mortality. Now, another indicator is life expectancy at birth. I'm going to talk about very quickly what is life expectancy at birth, which is often misunderstood, that when we talk about life expectancy, it doesn't mean how many years the person is going to live. Is the newborn today, children born today, how long they are going to live? That's based on a technique. It's known as life table. I cannot go into that very detailed, but it provides an estimate of how long a child born today is going to live on an average in a population on the basis of schedule of age-specific mortality rate. Once you have age-specific death rate or age-specific mortality rate is the same thing, then you can calculate the life expectancy at birth. And as a matter of fact, you can also calculate it at each age. You can calculate it at age 5, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 60. Basically, it is done through life table. Life expectancy is birth is calculated separately for males because their risk of dying is different. Males are at a higher risk of dying than females are because of certain built-in mechanism that doesn't allow men to live longer, especially under the conditions when proper health care is provided. Because as shown in Japan, for example, the life expectancy at birth is much higher for females than males, as shown here. In Japan, females on average at the time of birth live 85 years as compared to males who live up to 78 years. And if you look at Pakistan, there's no that great difference because many women die in childbirth in Pakistan, and that's why they are unable to live longer, much longer than males do, as it happens in Japan, Sweden, UK, China, in most of the countries which are either developed or they are facing or they are going through rapid demographic transition.